So, Preston, we have more stuff coming out of the Cushing Library. For those of you who don't recall...
It never ends. It
never ends. And, by the way, shout out to G-Stuff. He was telling me more about what was going on. According to him, he only went through the A Feast for Crows draft, and he didn't go through, like, the other stuff. And apparently there's more drafts over there in regards to the other novels. So, Now, of course, G-Stuff, looked at the Feast for Crows. This person here, I want to get their name here, so let me pull them up real quick. rehearsedtoast on Reddit, he was looking over the A Game of Thrones drafts, and you read it, and you found some interesting stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I've read his post here. So he was looking over a manuscript of A Game of Thrones from 1993, November 1993, and a second manuscript of A Game of Thrones from November 1994. Now, Game of Thrones was published in 96, so, and it's going to be finished, probably, or I think early in that year. I want to get the exact date on when was Game of Thrones published, the exact month. It was published August 1st, 96, which means he's going to be finished with the draft in early of that year. And we kind of know, obviously books change over time, but how much they change is kind of interesting. Like the original stories and what gets cut and what gets changed. I think we've all read, we've talked about the original outline of A Game of Thrones and things like that and how different it is. But
how the outline had Robb and Joffrey fighting each other on the battlefield, and Tyrion was in love with Arya. Yeah, and
Sansa was not a character, and Tyrion was not a little person, and all sorts of differences. And so it's kind of interesting. So we go back in time, time traveling Bran. We go back in time to November 93. America's. It's a different time. People like Guns N' Roses. It's and George R.R. Martin is finishing his 1993 manuscript of A Game of Thrones, and there's some small differences from what's published in 96. And so one of the things that was kind of interesting is there was a plague introduced already happening in A Game of Thrones from the beginning. In fact, the plague kills Jon Arryn, not poison, and Ned is fearful of catching the plague if he heads south. In this, now keep in mind, maybe I should backtrack a little. This November 93 draft only has the first 13 chapters of A Game of Thrones because just George hasn't finished the rest. So these, but for the most part, these 13 chapters are very similar to the published material, except for these few changes. So one is that there's this plague, which is interesting because obviously we know about the grayscale epidemic that's going to happen. That's been, foreshadowed with John Connington arriving with grayscale to Westeros. And people also point to A Clash of Kings at the House of the Undying, that there's this stone beast that breathes fire that Dany sees, and people kind of assume that this is the grayscale epidemic. But so even before A Clash of Kings, way back in the beginning, way back when he first wrote these chapters, he was envisioning an epidemic of some sort that was going to be killing people. That was a main thing from the beginning, but he decided to remove the plague and bring in grayscale later as a concept. Grayscale is introduced in A Clash of Kings. There's no mention of grayscale prior to A Clash of Kings, but it's of course introduced right there in the prologue with Shireen, and then it's I think it's mentioned as well with Theon in that same book. these little funny thing like words are wind, like it doesn't appear until a certain book and then it's mentioned all over the place, or somebody saying nuncle, like it's it makes no sense that it wouldn't be earlier. No, it's mentioned in Grayscale is just mentioned in just in context of Shireen, but nonetheless, like it's introduced as a concept in that book, and then I think Grayscale is barely mentioned in later books, but in Storm of Swords, but then kind of like reappears. I guess Grayscale is mentioned once in a Storm of Swords with regards to Shireen, and then it's mentioned quite a bit once you get to A Feast for Crows and A Dance with Dragons. And so I don't know, he always had this idea that there was going to be a plague from the very beginning. So I guess it's going to be a very important part of the plot.
Actually, I wanted to ask you about the idea that Jon Con would be spreading the Grayscale plague across Westeros. Is this one of your theories, or has this been in the community for quite some time?
I think most people accept that Jon Con is going to be spreading Grayscale across Westeros. Or else they just don't think about it. They various characters bring up Grayscale and talk and fear it. Like people at the Wall are fearing Shireen. Pycelle brings up the story of the Grayscale breaking out in Old Town and stuff like this. The Grayscale's brought up by the Ironborn. It feels like a Chekhov's gun, this deadly disease that could go around and kill so many people. And I think with the House of the Undying vision at the same time, people just kind of have this idea that there's going to be this epidemic happening. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe people just I've never met a fan who didn't think that there was going to be that Grayscale wasn't going to play a major role. Like a breakout wasn't going to play a major role. I actually was very surprised when Game of Thrones, the show, had Grayscale essentially just be Jorah catching it and then immediately getting cured. Like there's no breakout, right? That really shocked me. That it was never part of the story.
Wait. How is it cured again in the show? Because I blocked it out of my mind. Doesn't Sam
reads a book? He reads a book about a method, and the other maester, Ebros, says that it's too risky, and Sam just does it anyway.
Well, what does he do? Does he melt down obsidian and then just rub it on Jorah's wounds? Or
he just cuts it off. I don't think it gets into does it get into the obsidian? I think he just goes in with a knife and has a method, some books about...
I remember him cut it. I fucking forgot. I blocked this out of my mind.
Yeah.
It's so dumb. He scrapes it off, and then, Jorah has, these gaping wounds. I think he goes and rubs in some obsidian on it. I'll have to look it up again.
Was it really that?
It was ridiculous.
Was it really obsidian?
I think it... I remember it being dragonglass. What else could it be?
Really? I don't.
Hold on. I need to look this up now because this is going to bother me.
Apparently, Sam is researching a bunch of books, and some Redditor with eagle eyes found a page, blew it up, and there's a page that says ingesting dragonglass might be a possible treatment for disease, which includes Grayscale.
There it is.
So, yeah, I was about to say, I don't remember anything in the show about Grayscale, curing anything. No. But okay, all right, Grayscale. That's really weird. Okay, but nonetheless, from the beginning,
right.
George wanted a big breakout. It's just that he started with Jon Arryn actually not dying of poison, but of that, and then decided to cut it and then bring it back. Or have it come in a different form. I'm talking about aborting a plot that he wants to bring in, but aborting it the first time and then doing it in a different manner. The religious zealots of A Clash of Kings disappear, but then which were clearly put there because he thought he was going to have a plot with religious zealots, but then he aborted that one and then brought in the the Sparrow movement later. So, this is the kind of thing where he has an idea about something and then aborts it and then does it again in a different way.
So that's why the remove plague plotline is
Yeah.
important, because we might be getting that with John Khan in Westeros. That's interesting. I would like to see that. I'm sure someone will probably take another trip to the Cushing Library and look at the Clash of Kings drafts, and I'm sure the religious zealots will pop up at that point.
What else is in there? So apparently in these early drafts, there's no Howland Reed, and Jon Arryn is the one that goes to the Tower of Joy with Ned. And that was, this was changed, and Howland Reed was created in order to fill that void. And I imagine that's just because if you're going to kill Jon Arryn at the very beginning of the book, like Jon Arryn's all the knowledge that Jon Arryn has dies with him, and so you want to create a different character in case you want to bring back that Tower of Joy situation.
I love how Howland has this weird popularity behind him, because he's literally one of the most important unseen characters in the entire series that isn't dead, who holds the answer to so many things, yet George is just holding him back for some reason. Because Howland, there's so many theories around him being the guy at Winterfell that Theon sees, or being the High Sparrow, or...
If you actually analyze Howland Reed as a character logically, he doesn't make any sense. He's an absolute asshole, right? This is supposedly Ned's best friend, and he sends fuck all soldiers to Robb's war. His best friend. Their enemies in the north sent more forces. Lady Dustin sent more forces, and she hated Ned. Howland Reed, his best friend, sends nobody. He sends 2 people with Bran. And that's it. Nobody, none of the Cranach men fight in the war. And so it's just, but of course, if you bring Howland Reed out, then all of a sudden all of the secrets he has are brought out. So George couldn't bring him out. I don't actually think that he was thinking about Howland Reed being a complete dickhead, a treasonous dickhead.
Treasonous!
You call your... Yeah, the banners were called, man. The banners were called. This is feudalism, okay? The banners were called. He's supposed to supply men, and he doesn't. So
I like that Jon Arryn is given more to do, because in the source material he's important in the past. He was the first one to raise his banners against the Mad King. Cool. And his death is what brings Ned south. Cool. But I like that he had more of a role in the story, and
but it's very abstract. That Jon Arryn is like a father to Ned, and they lived all these years together. But at the same time, we don't have any interaction. There's no moment where Ned says, "Well, this one time I was hanging with Jon Arryn and this happened." That doesn't, none of that. So everything's very abstract about Jon Arryn's role. He must be we kind of accept, we're told, we're not shown his importance. Oh yes, Ned lived there for years. Jon Arryn must be important. He must be like a father.
Well, to be fair, Ned also thinks about random things. Instead of weren't you the one who pointed out that he thinks about Daenerys more than he does Jon, and he comes to the immediate conclusion that Cersei must have an incestuous relationship with her brother instead of it being just some random other blonde guy?
Yeah, I mean, Ned's funny. There's a lot of funny things about a Game of Thrones and what people think about, but but yeah, it's just all of these years spent in the Vale, and I don't know. It's just we never really hear about how Jon Arryn is, or what Ned's life was like. Does Ned know how to joust? What does he think about the Faith of the Seven? All of these things, what's it like? What was it like there? We don't know. We don't know. So, in these early drafts of A Game of Thrones, there is no "Promise Me Ned" lines. That's kind of an added thing later, which is funny because a lot of these things all together, Jon Arryn being at the Tower of Joy and stuff like that, all of this gets hammered out later, right? When he's thinking about the Tower of Joy, like that's where the "Promise Me Ned" line comes from, and what it means, and connecting it to Howland Reed. He must have really rethought the whole story when he finally started thinking about Tower of Joy. Actually, I'm getting the timeline wrong here, because it's actually the 94 manuscript is where the "Promise Me Ned" lines are inserted. They're not in the 93 manuscript. So
right.
He so that's where the Tower of Joy is first put in, and it's Jon Arryn there instead of Howland Reed. And by 94, the plague has been removed, and it's just Jon Arryn dying of a sickness. What else? So in these early drafts, we have an early map of Westeros, which is funny because the map is very empty, but we have certain locations that are identified on there, and I think they're identified because certain characters appear, and so you want to point out where they're from. So the wall is obviously marked. The last river is marked. I don't know. I guess. I mean, the last river is where where the Dreadfort is on, right? No, the Dreadfort's not on the last river. The Dreadfort's on the Weeping Water. The last river is where Last Hearth is. So I don't know why specifically he wants to put the last river on the map. I guess he thinks the last river has not yet really played a very big role in anything. So unless, is it mentioned in the Jon chapter where they travel to the wall? Oh no, it's not mentioned until Clash of Kings.
I'm impressed that you're even able to make out some of this stuff, because no offense to the poster, a lot of whatever phone he used to take pictures of, it's not in the high enough resolution, so I can barely make out some of this. I can make out Iron Islands, and you pointed out Three Sisters. I was not able to make out Isle of Faces. Kinda. And to me, that doesn't look like River Run. You say that's River Run right there. It looked like Raven Hall to me, but okay.
So on this map, the last river is marked, so maybe he's thinking about the Umbers. Nothing else in the north. The Bay of Ice is marked, and Winterfell, the King's Road, Bear Island is marked, which I understand that because Jorah is from Bear Island. He's marked the Three Sisters. Of course, the Three Sisters have played almost no role in the story so far. I mean, maybe he's just marking it because it's islands and he likes marking his islands. But Three Sisters is a very minor store, minor place right now. The Fingers are marked clearly because Littlefinger is from there. The Neck, he's marked it as the Black Bog, which that went away, So Iron Islands is marked. Pike is marked. And then we get the Trident is marked. River Run is marked. River Run, see, you read that and you're like, oh, could that be something different, like Raven Run? And I was like, no. So River Run is named after the first and last word of James Joyce's Finnegan's Wake. And so it's just a word that George thought was poetic and is throwing a James Joyce shout out there. So, River Run's going to be River Run. It's not going to be something different. So the Vale of Arryn is called Arryn Vale instead, which is kind of
the same thing.
It is. But it does make me think a little differently. So in George R.R. Martin's Thousand Worlds universe, there was a Vale, spelled differently. There's an area of space called the Vale, but it's Veil, like a shroud. Yeah. And so I was like, maybe the Vale is the Vale or something. But no, I think he was calling it Arryn Vale, and then he turned it around to the Vale of Arryn, which I think somebody was mentioning, I think, isn't that from like, I mean, this is years and years before this, but isn't there a place from Frozen very similar to Arrynvale?
Is it? I think it's Arrendale. Maybe
Arrendale.
I've never seen Frozen, so I'll take your word for it.
Instead of it being the Eyrie, he's made the capital of Arrynvale Harrenhal. Now, Harrenhal is probably named after Carrenhal, which is a fort from a story called Bitter Blooms that George R.R. Martin wrote. While the Eyrie is from Windhaven, which is another book that George R.R. Martin wrote. So, he's essentially just replaced like one throwaway line from, or throwaway like thing, one reference to his own work for another one. And then moved Harrenhal to the Riverlands, but that's where both of those come from. So, what else is marked? Casterly Rock, River Run, Isle of Faces, Dragonstone, King's Landing, The Reach, Highgarden, Storm's End, Dorne, but instead of Sunspear, Dorne is called Sunspear is called Ironport.
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing too.
I suppose if you look at it in a First Men migration kind of way or whatever, like Westeros was supposed to have bronze and bronze weapons, and then the idea is that the invaders brought steel, so maybe it's like Ironport is like bringing the place where iron and steel came over in this version. I mean, later I understand that like the Andals invade the Vale first and all of this, and the First Men, where that comes from, were also using bronze. So,
but technically, that wouldn't be a port, because at that point, when the First Men are coming over, isn't the arm of Dorne connecting to Essos still intact?
Yeah, that's
So,
that's true. But who knows his story at this time?
Probably Children of the Forest weren't even a thing.
Yeah, but nonetheless, like it's Sunspear instead of Ironport. And this is though kind of the weirdest thing on the map. So the the arbor is called Rhoyne. Which of course is like the river in Essos where the Rhoynar come from, who come over to become the Dornish. But the Rhoyne is just this island, which kind of like changes this idea. I don't know when the first time he says king of the First Men, the Andals, and the Rhoynar, right? Because like the Rhoynar just being this one tiny little island.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Let's see where Rhoyne or Rhoynar first appears. Oh. Well, I mean, Numeria is named after the warrior queen of the Rhoyne, which is that's in Arya 1, A Game of Thrones.
So you have to wonder.
So, I mean, it'd be interesting to know if and the Rhoynar, the Andals, the Rhoynar, and the First Men, like that's from Bran 1.
And you can tell this was fairly important because there's another location here that he highlights, though I can't see what it is. I can't.
Yeah, it kind of looks like flintstone, but it's something stone, right?
Mm-hmm.
Could that be runestone?
I was thinking that, but no. Like, that looks like an F. You're right, it looks like an F, but it's so hard to tell. Like, this, once again, no offense to the poster, clearly wasn't taking the pictures on, like, in a 4K camera, so it's really, like, even if you zoom in, it becomes distorted, so it's hard to say. I don't want to say maybe that's probably the placement for old.
I mean, it kind of looks like fume stone or so. Like that's the way it look. Like it looks like my eyes to me, but that doesn't make any sense. Any sense?
Are there any areas around the lower reach where stone is involved? maybe he moved it there, like with Harrenhal. How Harrenhal was moved from the Riverlands to the Eyrie, or to the Vale.
I don't think so. Let me. If there's anything from that area, the Arbor, the Redwine Straits. No. Starfall, Blackmont, High Hermitage, Sandstone.
It doesn't look like an S. I'm also wondering, because Old Town is not highlighted on here. I'm wondering if that's the replacement for Old Town.
No, not at all. Yeah, I mean, clearly it was going to be some major important place that was, it was, kind of makes sense now in a, like, it was this enlightened isle. Like, I imagine that if there's no Old Town, that maybe that's where the Citadel is, and all sorts of places, and everything fancy and cool and civilized is on that island. It's like a Numenor kind of thing,
right? Yeah,
and Westeros is this uniting of that, like that being so important. Because right now, even if you start thinking of the balance of like, the Rhoynar, the Andals, and the first men, the Andals and the Rhoynar. The Rhoynar, are kind of the least important of the three in the story so far. Like it's just Dorne. It's the least populous kingdom. Like they don't really have any major cultural influence that has like affected the rest of the kingdoms, like, I don't know, like why would he, like, it's almost like to the point where like, why would the kings of Westeros even bother differentiating them, but the Dornish,
out of respect, because for the longest time the Dornish weren't even a part of the Seven Kingdoms technically. So right. I'm assuming in this draft, despite the fact that Rhoyne is a small island, they have to have some type of considerable power, like the Redwines do in the main story with the fleet. So,
yeah, but see, now this is a funny little rabbit hole, because that term being the king of the Andals, the First Men, and the Rhoynar, that's done by Targaryens, who are Valyrians. They're not they're not First Men, they're not Andal, they're not Rhoynar. They're Valyrians. So why wouldn't a king say that I am the king of the Valyrians? Like, why wouldn't you say that you're also Valyrian? I'm king of Valyria, the Valyrians, the Rhoynar, the Andals, and the First Men. Like, why wouldn't you say that as well?
Because the Valyrians are the ruling family, and they already have claim over Westeros, so it's kind of redundant to include themselves in it. That would maybe imply that there are other Valyrians, which technically kind of there are with the Velaryons. They have the Valyrian blood, but still, it's just Targaryen supremacy bullshit.
When the Queen of England is called the Queen of England, she's still like, she's queen of a lot, but they still mention England. It doesn't really make, I don't know. It's kind of weird. All of these things are kind of weird. Like, why is there an island called Rhoyne in the corner of the, and the thing is look at the design of it. It's got like double lines. It's been made thick, like real special care. There's like this tiny little river in the middle, and this like feeding some little port with an island in front. I mean, that's all been cut.
I think you're correct. George loves his islands. He loves naming his islands. Dragonstone is mentioned, the Iron Islands, the Three Sisters, and what's no, that's the Fingers. That's right. I thought he named that little island there. Maybe that's it. He loves naming his islands.
I mean, red wines were also mentioned very early in a Game of Thrones. So that island is, considered very important, like very early in a Game of Thrones. But that's Rhoyne.
Well, he didn't name the Shield Islands or Tarth, right. So
yeah. Well,
that.
Brienne doesn't become a character until the next book.
That's right.
though it's a huge island, Tarth. I mean, it's weird that like Bay of Ice gets named. I'm trying to think when Bay of Ice is first mentioned here. Oh, not really mentioned much at all. So I don't know why it got attention. So I don't know. There's some things that are random, but some things that are very interesting on that map.
But yeah. So are there any other interesting changes in the draft?
Is that all the? That's all the kind of interesting things for now. I mean, this is just a. I mean, we still talked about this for a good 30 minutes. But yeah, the weirdest thing for me is that Rhoyne Island, you know? What the hell is going on there?
I'm sure someone was going to, like, hone in on this. Someone in the comments, they always do. They're going to hone in on this and tell us in the comments what the actual name of that special location on the island is. I can't see it. It's too blurry for me when I try to zoom in.
Yeah. And people are now going back, and I think we're going to get more out of the library now that we're going to have more visitors. Every time, you know, people post about the library, about the Cushing library, like other people are motivated to go, and then they find stuff. So we'll
Preston,
see.
when can we expect you to go?
Oh, I mean, that's I live in Taiwan. I don't. I'll be here in Taiwan for another year, so not for a long time.
Gotcha. Because I keep seeing people in the comments going, we should definitely start a GoFundMe to get Preston over there from Taiwan to Texas to check this out. But if anybody does go, definitely feel free to hit me up on Twitter, Facebook, wherever the hell. If you get some stuff like this, or just link me your post. Or eventually people always link it to me anyways, on Reddit if you guys post it there. And please take a nice high resolution, possibly 4K pictures of anything you see that has a map on it so we can carefully take a look at this. But no, so far this is the Game of Thrones one. Of course, G Stuff did the Feast for Crows one. So do we know if there are any like major manuscripts for Clash, Storm of Swords, and Dance of Dragons?
Yeah. No, I mean, there's all sorts of manuscripts for all of them. Plus there's wild card stuff in there too. But yeah, but obviously, like people put the most time and scrutiny into the Dance with Dragons drafts, but like I'm sure there's little Easter eggs here and there to find in different drafts, but it's hard work going through and like trying to find all the differences.
When I spoke to G Stuff privately, he told me about all the people who got inspired by his trip there, and they're all going to go and head over there and check it out. So in the coming months, we will be seeing more of these. And guys, as soon as they come out, we will cover them. Preston, do you mind if we wrap it up here?
Sounds good.
Guys, thank you so much for joining us. As always, we'll see you all next time. Have a good one.